It was late evening when Daniel checked the time and realized he had missed the earlier buses. The city streets were quiet, the usual hum of traffic reduced to the occasional distant car. He walked quickly, hoping to reach the last bus before it left the stop. His coat was buttoned tight, but the cold wind still found its way through the fabric. Every step felt heavier than the last. At the bus stop, he saw a few other people waiting. Most of them were strangers, faces tired and distant, lost in their own thoughts. A young woman held a small bag tightly against her chest. An older man leaned against a pole, eyes half closed. Daniel stood at the far end, trying not to make eye contact, feeling the weight of a long day pressing down on him. The bus arrived with a soft hiss of brakes. People moved quietly, boarding in a slow, careful rhythm. Daniel found a seat near the back, sliding in silently. Outside, the streetlights glowed like scattered stars, and the wet asphalt reflected their pale light. The bus felt like a small world moving through a larger, sleeping city. As the bus started, Daniel looked around. He noticed small, ordinary details: the way the woman adjusted her scarf, the older man tapping his cane lightly, the faint sound of someone humming under their breath. Each detail reminded him that everyone had a story, and he could only imagine what it might be.
Halfway through the route, the bus stopped near a park. A small boy and his mother climbed aboard, dripping from the rain. The boy held a tiny umbrella, too small for his height, and smiled shyly at the people already seated. That smile, though quiet, seemed to lift something heavy in the air. Daniel found himself smiling back without realizing it. The bus moved again, passing familiar streets and unfamiliar corners. Daniel's thoughts wandered. He thought about his day: long hours at work, a difficult conversation with his boss, the email he forgot to send. He thought about the small mistakes he had made, the things he could have done differently, and the people he had ignored in passing. Then, something unexpected happened. The young woman sitting across from him accidentally dropped her notebook. It slid across the floor, coming to a stop near Daniel's feet. He picked it up and handed it to her. Their eyes met briefly. She thanked him with a soft smile. In that moment, Daniel felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the cold outside. The bus grew quieter as it approached the outskirts of the city. Fewer passengers remained. Daniel realized that for some of these people, this ride was more than just transportation. It was a small pause, a chance to sit, to breathe, to think, to be unnoticed, but still connected to others through small, shared moments. As the final stop neared, Daniel felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He was not ready to face his empty apartment yet. The thought of sitting alone in the silence made his chest tighten. But the bus, slow and steady, continued on, carrying him forward through the dark streets. When the bus finally stopped at the terminal, Daniel stepped out. The streets were empty. Only the soft hum of distant cars and the occasional bark of a dog broke the quiet. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold night air on his face, and realized that the journey, though short, had reminded him of something simple. Kindness exists everywhere, even in fleeting moments with strangers. As he walked toward his apartment, Daniel thought about the people he had seen that evening. The small smiles, the exchanged gestures, the silent understanding between strangers, each had left a mark, however tiny, on his heart. And he understood that sometimes the journey itself, even on the last bus home, could be a gentle reminder of the quiet connections that make life bearable. At his door, Daniel paused. He could hear the faint echo of the bus engine in the distance, a soft reminder that the world was still moving, still full of lives intersecting in small, meaningful ways. He smiled softly, knowing that tomorrow there would be another bus, another ride, and another chance to notice the simple humanity around him. And in that quiet night, Daniel felt a subtle peace settle over him. The city, though dark and empty, was not lonely. Its stories, its people, and its small, unnoticed acts of kindness lingered in the air, and he realized that sometimes the last bus home carries more than passengers. It carries glimpses of hope, connection, and the gentle reminder that no one truly rides alone. It was late evening when Daniel checked his watch and realized he had missed the earlier buses. The city streets were quieter than usual, the hum of traffic reduced to distant, scattered sounds. A thin fog hovered over the streetlights, making the roads look soft and dreamlike. He hurried along the sidewalks, his coat pulled tight around him, wishing the last bus would arrive before it disappeared into the night. Every step felt heavy, yet he kept moving, hoping to reach some kind of normalcy at home after the long, exhausting day. At the bus stop, a few people waited silently. Most faces were tired and distant, lost in their own thoughts. An elderly man leaned on a cane, eyes half closed, as if he had been waiting for hours. A mother held a small child tightly in her arms, trying to shield her from the chilly wind. Daniel found a spot at the far end of the bench, feeling the weight of his own exhaustion pressing against him. He looked up at the pale streetlights and wondered how many stories were hidden behind each tired face around him. The bus arrived slowly, hissing as it braked, doors opening with a quiet mechanical sigh. People climbed aboard carefully, avoiding puddles on the steps. Daniel stepped in, scanning the nearly empty seats. He slid into a spot near the back and looked out the window. Streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt, and distant headlights moved slowly like drifting fireflies. The bus felt like a moving bubble of life, carrying its passengers through the silent city, each lost in their private world. As the bus moved on, Daniel observed the people around him. A young woman clutched her small bag, staring quietly at her hands. An older man tapped his cane softly, humming a tune too low for anyone else to hear. Each movement was small, ordinary, yet somehow meaningful. Daniel realized that everyone had a story he would never fully know, and that the city itself was a collection of these quiet, invisible lives intersecting for brief moments. Halfway through the route, the bus stopped near a small park. A mother and her young son climbed aboard, dripping from the rain. The boy carried a tiny umbrella, far too small for his height, and smiled shyly at the passengers. That small smile seemed to soften the mood inside the bus. Daniel found himself smiling back, surprised at the warmth spreading in his chest. He had not expected a simple gesture to touch him so deeply, but in that instant, the heaviness of his day felt a little lighter. As the bus continued along its route, Daniel's thoughts wandered. He reflected on the day, missed deadlines, tense conversations at work, small mistakes he wished he could undo. He thought about people he had ignored in the past, the barista who smiled at him that morning, the neighbor he had nodded at without a word. Each memory carried a pang of guilt, a reminder that human connection was often fleeting but powerful. Then a small incident broke his reverie. The young woman across from him dropped her notebook. It slid across the floor and stopped near Daniel's feet. Without hesitation, he picked it up and handed it back to her. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled softly and thanked him. That simple exchange created a warmth in Daniel that he had not felt all day. It was a small act, yet it reminded him of something fundamental. Kindness does not have to be large to matter. The bus grew quieter as it moved toward the outskirts of the city. Fewer passengers remained. Daniel looked out at the passing buildings, at the dim glow of distant windows. He realized that for some, this ride was more than a way home. It was a pause, a chance to breathe, to reflect, to exist without being judged. The bus, in its quiet motion, became a small sanctuary in the dark city. Daniel thought about how often he had rushed through life, failing to notice the simple moments of human connection, the small smiles, the nods, the fleeting eye contact. These were the things that reminded him of the quiet beauty in everyday life. He thought about the bus stop he passed every morning and evening, and how the presence of strangers, each carrying their private stories, created a silent community that few acknowledged. As the final stop approached, Daniel felt a mix of anxiety and relief. He was not ready to return to the silence of his apartment. The thought of sitting alone, surrounded by stillness, made his chest tighten. Yet he knew the bus had carried him through more than streets. It had carried him through his own thoughts, fears, and the gentle realization that he was not truly alone. When the bus finally stopped, Daniel stepped out into the empty street. Only the faint hum of distant cars broke the quiet. He took a deep breath, feeling the night air on his face. The city seemed softer than before, less intimidating. He walked slowly toward his apartment, reflecting on the people he had seen that evening. Every smile, every small act of kindness, every quiet gesture had left a mark, however subtle, on his heart. A week later, Daniel returned to the same bus stop. The city was still quiet in the late evening. He noticed the young woman again, and this time they shared a small nod. The elderly man with the cane was also there, tapping softly, humming a quiet tune. Daniel realized that the bus stop had become a place where stories intersected. Each person contributed in their own way, leaving behind invisible threads of connection. Over the following months, Daniel found himself smiling more often, not just on the bus, but in everyday life. At work, he greeted colleagues with warmth he had never shown before. On the street, he nodded at strangers and offered small courtesies. He noticed the effect. Some smiled back, some were surprised, but all interactions carried a subtle reminder of the shared human experience. One rainy night, Daniel helped a woman who had slipped on the wet pavement. She thanked him with a soft, surprised smile. Later, he passed a young boy at the bus stop who looked lost and unsure. Daniel offered a gentle nod, and the boy smiled back. Each small moment reinforced the quiet lesson the bus had taught him, that life's simplest gestures often carry the most weight. Years passed, and Daniel never forgot the last bus home. It remained a symbol of connection, kindness, and the unseen lives around him. He continued to ride the bus when he could, noticing the smallest things, the laughter of children, the faint music of a musician playing in the distance, the shared understanding in someone's eyes. Each moment reminded him that even fleeting connections have the power to shape lives. Eventually, Daniel began to tell his own story to strangers in subtle ways. Sometimes he would share a smile, sometimes a kind word. He never expected recognition, yet he discovered the same warmth spreading quietly from person to person. He understood that the old bus had carried more than passengers. It had carried hope, empathy, and the gentle reminder that human connection can exist even in the smallest gestures. And so, the last bus home became more than a ride. It became a lesson, a memory, and a quiet story about the importance of noticing others. Daniel understood that no one is truly alone, and that sometimes the smallest smile, the quietest nod, or the simplest act of kindness can be enough to brighten someone's day. Even when the city slept, even when the streets were empty, Daniel carried the lesson with him. The bus, the strangers, the fleeting moments, they were all reminders that life is made of small, meaningful connections. And in that understanding, he found a peace that was deeper than any quiet street or empty room could give.